Imagine stepping back in time not just a few centuries but over 1,000 years. The year is 950. You are standing on a stone bridge over the Guadalquivir before you, a sprawling metropolis buzzing with an almost modern energy. This is Cordoba, the capital of Al-Andalus. It's the largest, most cultured and most dazzling city in Western Europe. Its streets are paved and lit by lanterns, unheard of compared to muddy London or Paris. The air hums, merchants hawking, scholars debating in shaded courtyards, fountains splashing in private gardens. This city truly shone. Sheer scale hits you first. Cordoba was a giant population soaring toward 500,000. London wouldn't reach that for 800 years. People from all corners flocked here, drawn by wealth, knowledge, opportunity. Traders from Byzantium with silks, Vikings from the north with furs, and scholars from Baghdad with manuscripts. The souks were labyrinth spices from the east, intricate leatherwork, gleaming metalcraft, finely woven textiles fit for kings. Not just commerce, a global crossroads beyond trade, refinement, and curiosity. Knowledge was the prized currency. Poetry filled the streets, recited by nobles and by ordinary people. Boys and girls learned to read and write, rare for the age, dozens of libraries, hundreds of thousands of scrolls and books. A city that celebrated the mind, invested in ideas and spaces where art, science, and philosophy flourished, a true city of light in Europe's dark ages. It didn't appear overnight, building a capital to rival the Islamic East, Baghdad and Damascus. They brought irrigation that greening the plains, architectural mastery that birthed breathtaking buildings, and a deep respect for scholarship. Cordoba became their jewel, a beacon to the world. In the heart of Cordoba's spring was a deep and abiding passion for science and learning. This wasn't a niche interest for a few cloistered elites, it was a city-wide obsession. The Caliphate of Cordoba became a magnet for the brightest minds. Medicine, in particular, saw incredible advancements. They understood the importance of hygiene. They performed complex surgeries. They developed a sophisticated understanding of pharmacology, using herbs and minerals. They wrote encyclopedias of medicine that would be used as standard textbooks in European universities for centuries. One of the most dazzling areas of progress was astronomy and mathematics. Cordoban scholars built on the works of Greek astronomers, and Indian ones creating incredibly precise astronomical tables. These tables were essential for navigation, for determining the direction of Mecca for prayer, and for creating accurate calendars. They perfected instruments like the astrolabe, a kind of ancient handheld computer. In mathematics, they popularized the Hindu-Arabic numeral system, including the revolutionary concept of zero, which paved the way for algebra. Think of Abbas ibn Firnas, a 9th century polymath. He was an astronomer, a poet, and an engineer who was fascinated by the mechanics of flight. He constructed wings from wood and feathers. He launched himself from a tower. He reportedly stayed airborne for several minutes, then made a bumpy landing and injured his back. He had forgotten to design a tail for steering and stability. While perhaps not a complete success, it was a stunningly bold attempt at human flight, centuries before anyone else in Europe would even dream of such a thing. This thirst for knowledge was supported by an incredible infrastructure. The city was home to over 70 libraries. The Caliph's own library was said to contain over 400,000 volumes. This was astonishing at a time when the largest library in Christian Europe might have held only a few hundred manuscripts, scribes, and bookbinders. A huge industry existed around the copying and dissemination of books. Knowledge was not locked away but was actively shared and debated. More books available, more scholars attracted to Cordoba, more new knowledge produced, leading to even more books. They embarked on a massive translation movement, rendering these ancient texts from Greek and Syriac into Arabic. This made the wisdom of the ancients accessible not just to the Arabic-speaking world but eventually back to Europe. It was in the libraries and schools of Cordoba that the forgotten philosophies and scientific discoveries of the past were reborn, studied, and expanded upon, creating a bridge of knowledge across the so-called Dark Ages. The genius of Cordoba wasn't confined to books, laboratories, it was written across the very fabric of the city in its stunning art and architecture. The rulers of Al-Andalus wanted their capital to be a spectacle, a city that would inspire awe in all who saw it. They developed a unique artistic style that blended elements from Umayyad heritage in Syria, Visigothic influences and innovations of their own. The result was a visual language that was sophisticated, intricate, and utterly captivating. It was an architecture of light-water geometry designed to create spaces that felt both grand and deeply spiritual. The hallmark of this style can be seen in the use of repeating geometric patterns, or arabesques. These complex interlocking designs were often based on stars' polygons, and they adorned walls, ceilings, floors. They represented the infinite and transcendent nature of God, avoiding human or animal forms. Alongside geometry, calligraphy was elevated to a high art form. Quranic verses, poetic lines were rendered in elegant, flowing scripts, turning words into mesmerizing compositions. These decorative elements, crafted in stucco tile carved wood, transformed buildings into immersive works of art. Nowhere was this ambition more evident than in palaces and public buildings. The caliphs built themselves a legendary palace city on the outskirts of Cordoba called Madinat al-Zahra, the Shining City. It was a sprawling complex of reception halls, private residences, government offices, mosques, gardens, all connected by covered walkways. Accounts from the time describe halls with ceilings of gold, silver, floors of polished marble, and fountains that spouted scented water. One famous room was said to have a large basin filled with mercury, which, when stirred, would send dazzling flashes of light dancing across the walls and ceiling, mimicking lightning. It was pure architectural theater, designed to overwhelm visitors with the power and wealth of the caliphate. The beauty extended beyond the grand palaces and into the homes of ordinary, albeit wealthy, citizens. The typical Cordoban house was designed for privacy and comfort in a hot climate. It was built around a central open-air courtyard or patio. A city is more than just its buildings, it is its people. And Cordoba was home to some of the most remarkable individuals of the Middle Ages. The story of Cordoba's rise is inseparable from the story of its visionary leaders, most notably Abd al-Rahman III. He came to power in 912 when Al-Andalus was fractured and weak. Through brilliant military and political strategy, he unified the territory. In 929 he declared himself caliph, a direct challenge to Baghdad. It was under his long and stable reign that Cordoba truly entered its spring. He was a master builder and patron who expanded the Great Mosque. He initiated the palace city of Madinat al-Zahra. Alongside rulers were towering intellectuals who made Cordoba famed for wisdom. One of the most famous was Averroes, or Ibn Rushd, a 12th century culmination of Cordoba's tradition. He was a true polymath, a physician. He was an astronomer, he was a judge. His enduring legacy was as a philosopher. He wrote extensive commentaries on Aristotle that reached Western Europe. Averroes argued that faith and reason, and that religion and philosophy, were not in opposition but paths to the same truth. His ideas were controversial yet hugely influential. His translations helped spark the Renaissance. The city echoed with the sound of poetry. Literature was cherished. Cordoba produced many celebrated poets. One was Walada bint al-Mustakfi, an 11th century princess. She was beautiful, fiercely independent, and a gifted poet. Unusually for her status, she did not wear a veil and hosted a literary salon. She was famed for sharp wit and passionate, often scandalous, love poetry. Her life challenges preconceptions about women's roles in the Islamic world. Then there was Hasdai ibn Shaprut, a Jewish scholar and physician and chief minister to Abd al-Rahman III. Hasdai was fluent in Arabic, he was fluent in Hebrew, he was fluent in Latin. Those languages made him an invaluable diplomat. He was a passionate patron of Jewish scholarship, supporting poets and scholars across the Jewish world. His high court position shows Cordoba's meritocratic nature, where talent could elevate people regardless of faith. If one building can be said to embody the soul of Islamic Cordoba, it is the Great Mosque, now known as the Mosque Cathedral or the Mesquita. To step inside it today is still a breathtaking experience, a journey into another world. Work began on the mosque in 786 on the site of a former Visigothic church. It was expanded by successive rulers over the next 2 centuries, each addition making it grander and more beautiful. By completion, it was one of the largest mosques in the Islamic world, capable of holding tens of thousands. It was the religious heart of the city and the social heart, a place for prayer, community gatherings, and education. The most iconic feature is its forest of columns. Over 850 columns fill the hall, made from jasper, onyx, marble, granite. Many were recycled from Roman buildings and Visigothic buildings. Above them rise double-tiered arches with alternating red brick and white stone voussoirs, creating higher ceilings and a mesmerizing rhythm that seems to stretch to infinity. One of the most remarkable aspects of Cordoba during its spring was the way in which people of different faiths, Muslims, Christians, Jews, lived and worked alongside one another. Historians have given this period a special name, La Convivencia, which translates as the coexistence or the living together. While it wasn't a perfect utopia, and there were certainly tensions and social hierarchies, yet the level of interaction and mutual influence between these three communities was unique in medieval Europe. In a world often defined by religious conflict, Cordoba offered a different model, one based on a degree of tolerance and practical cooperation that allowed for incredible cultural cross-pollination. Under Islamic law, Christians and Jews were considered dhimmi, or protected people. This meant that as long as they accepted Muslim rule and paid a special tax, they were granted the freedom to practice their own religion, maintain their own laws, and run their own community affairs. They were allowed to keep their churches and synagogues, although the construction of new ones was sometimes restricted. While they were second-class citizens in some respects, this status provided a level of security and autonomy that was often unheard of for religious minorities in other parts of the medieval world, particularly in Christian Europe, where Jewish communities faced frequent and violent persecution. This environment of relative tolerance allowed for a flourishing of culture within the minority communities. The Jewish community of Cordoba, in particular, experienced a golden age of its own. Scholars like Hasdai ibn Shaprut and the great philosopher Maimonides, who was born in Cordoba in 1135 just as the era was ending, produced brilliant works of theology, philosophy, and science, often writing in Arabic. They participated fully in the intellectual life of the city, engaging in debates with Muslim scholars and contributing to the Great Translation movement. This period saw a renaissance of Hebrew poetry and grammar, all nurtured within the broader intellectual climate of Al-Andalus. The convivencia was more than just tolerance. It was an active and fruitful exchange. Christians, Jews, Muslims borrowed from each other's traditions in art, music, food, and language. Scholars from all three faiths collaborated in the great project of translating and commenting on the works of the ancient Greeks. This shared intellectual enterprise created a common ground that transcended religious differences. While we should be careful not to romanticize it, the system was always predicated on Muslim supremacy and could break down under pressure. The story of the convivencia in Cordoba remains a powerful example of how different cultures can not only coexist, but also enrich one another in profound and lasting ways. What would it have been like to spend a day in 10th century Cordoba? The city would awaken to the call to prayer from dozens of minarets. As the sun rose, the streets filled with life, not narrow, filthy alleys. Cordoba's main streets were paved, cleaned regularly, and lit at night by oil lamps. That lighting made the streets safer and kept social life going after sunset. People from all walks of life filled the streets, merchants with donkey carts, artisans at workshops, children heading to school.